"I just want to see my balance," she said. The millionaire laughed until he saw the screen. The bank hall was quiet in the heavy, uncomfortable way that only places filled with money and power could be. Marble floors reflected the ceiling lights like cold water, and every step echoed as if announcing who belonged there and who did not. At the far end of the line stood a woman whose shoes were worn thin at the edges, whose coat had seen too many winters, and whose eyes carried a tired kind of hope that refused to die. She had not come to ask for help, not to beg, not to borrow. She had come for one simple thing. She wanted to see her balance. When she finally reached the counter and made her request, a ripple of amusement moved through the space. A man nearby, polished and expensive from head to toe, let out a laugh that cut through the silence. It was the kind of laugh that came from certainty, from believing the world always made sense in your favor. That laugh would not last long. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that life can still surprise even the most broken hearts, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel Honestia. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The woman's life had not always looked like this. Years earlier, she had been someone people admired quietly, not famous, not rich, but dependable in a way that mattered. She woke before sunrise, worked long hours, and still found time to care for others. Her husband had died young, leaving her with responsibilities that felt too heavy for one person, and soon after, the factory where she worked shut down without warning. What savings she had vanished slowly, eaten away by hospital bills, rent, and the simple cost of surviving. She learned how quickly dignity could shrink when the world decided you were no longer useful. Yet through all of it, she held on to one promise she had made to herself during better days. She would never stop believing that honesty and patience would one day be rewarded. She had opened her bank account many years ago, back when life still felt stable. It was nothing special, just a place to keep what little she earned. Over time, she stopped checking it. There were days she forgot it existed at all, too busy calculating how to stretch one meal into two, how to make old clothes last another season. Oh, recently, however, a letter had arrived at her small apartment. It was thin and official, the kind of envelope that usually brought anxiety. But this one mentioned her account, urging her to visit the branch in person. No explanation, no warning, just a suggestion that felt strangely urgent. She hesitated for days, afraid of disappointment, afraid of being reminded of how little she had left. But something inside her told her to go. The morning she entered the bank, she almost turned back at the door. The polished glass reflected a version of herself she barely recognized. Lines on her face told stories of worry and endurance. She felt invisible among people who walked confidently, whose clothes whispered wealth without trying. As she waited in line, she rehearsed her request in her head, keeping it simple, keeping it humble. She did not expect miracles. She only wanted clarity. The man who laughed stood a few steps behind her. He was known in the city, though she did not recognize him at first. A self-made millionaire, celebrated in magazines and business events, a symbol of success in a world obsessed with it. To him, the bank was almost a second home. He was greeted by name, offered coffee, treated with the respect reserved for those whose presence promised profit. When he heard the woman's request to simply see her balance, something about it amused him. In his world, balances were discussed in boardrooms, analyzed by advisors, measured in power. The idea that someone would come in with such a small, uncertain hope struck him as absurd. The woman did not react to the laughter. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed cruelty. She stood still, hands folded, eyes fixed on the counter as if focusing hard enough could make the moment pass quicker. The clerk typed in her details, expression neutral but distracted. Seconds stretched. The screen loaded slowly, and in that pause, memories flooded the woman's mind. Late nights, empty refrigerators, prayers whispered into darkness. She remembered times she had helped others even when she had little, believing that goodness was not a transaction but a way of being. Then the clerk froze. Something on the screen did not match expectations. The clerk blinked, refreshed the page, and leaned closer. The woman noticed the shift immediately, the subtle change in posture that signaled surprise. The man behind her stopped laughing, curiosity replacing amusement. The quiet in the bank deepened, thick and tense. When the clerk finally looked up, there was a tremor in their voice, not from fear, but from disbelief. The balance displayed was not small, it was not modest, it was enormous, the kind of number that rewrote stories. Years earlier, unknown to the woman, a legal settlement had been processed in her name. A distant relative she barely remembered had listed her as a beneficiary, believing in her integrity more than anyone else's. The case had dragged on for years, buried under paperwork and delays. Notifications were sent to an old address returned unopened. The money sat untouched, quietly growing, waiting for someone to claim it. And now, after all this time, it had surfaced in the most unexpected way. The woman did not understand at first. She thought there must be a mistake. Her life had trained her to distrust good news. The clerk explained slowly, carefully, as if afraid the truth might shatter her. Around them, attention gathered. Whispers spread. The man who had laughed leaned forward, his confidence cracking as he saw the number reflected faintly on the glass. For the first time in a long while, he felt small. The woman's knees weakened, not from greed or excitement, but from relief, so intense it hurt. All the nights she had wondered if honesty was foolish, if kindness was wasted, seemed to collapse into that single moment. Tears filled her eyes, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet and unstoppable. She did not celebrate, she did not boast. She simply closed her eyes and breathed as if finally allowed to rest. The millionaire watched her reaction closely. He had expected shock, maybe triumph. What he saw instead unsettled him. There was no hunger in her expression, no rush to claim status. There was gratitude, humility, and something else he had not seen in a long time: peace. It forced him to confront something uncomfortable. All his success, all his wealth, had not given him that look. As the bank staff processed the details, the woman sat down, hands trembling slightly. People around her treated her differently now, voices softer, smiles polite. The contrast was sharp, almost painful. She realized how quickly respect followed money, how conditional dignity could be. It strengthened a resolve inside her. If this fortune meant anything, it would not turn her into someone unrecognizable. Over the following weeks, her life changed in ways both large and small. She moved out of the apartment that held too many memories of struggle, but she did not choose extravagance. She paid off debts, funded education programs in her old neighborhood, and quietly supported families who reminded her of herself. She visited the factory workers she once stood beside, offering opportunities without pity. She understood loss, and she understood the power of being seen. The millionaire, unable to shake the moment, sought her out later. Not for money, not for business, but for understanding. He realized that his laughter had not been about her balance, but about his own certainty that the world was predictable, that worth was visible at a glance. Watching her grace under pressure, her restraint in victory, challenged everything he believed. It humbled him in ways no financial loss ever had. Time passed, and the story of that day faded from public attention, but it lived on quietly in the hearts of those who witnessed it. The woman continued to live simply, deliberately. She learned that wealth could amplify who you already were, not replace it. And she chose every day to remain the person who had once stood in line, asking only to see her balance. Near the end of her journey, she reflected on how close she had come to giving up, to believing the laughter of others was the final verdict on her life. She understood now that some blessings arrive late, not because they are mistakes, but because they need you to be ready. Ready to handle them with care, with wisdom shaped by hardship. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that patience, honesty, and quiet strength still matter in a loud, judgmental world, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Honestia. Your engagement helps spread stories that heal rather than divide. And before this story ends, leave a comment below telling us what this moment meant to you, or share a time when life surprised you after you had almost lost hope. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Because sometimes the smallest request made with a tired but faithful heart can reveal a truth so powerful that it silences laughter, reshapes lives, and reminds us all that we never truly know what someone is carrying until we choose to look beyond the surface.